When I saw Monster Hunter World premiere at Sony's E3 2017 press conference a few years back, I thought, wow, this looks incredibly generic and I will never play this. Oh, how wrong I was. The game would eventually release in 2018 and I was hooked. That is saying a lot, seeing as, for me, it became my most played and enjoyed game of a truly stacked year. Then, after a year of constant updates and events, Capcom offered up an expansion in that of Iceborne. Normally, I don't dive into expanded game content because I want to try out newer things, but for the first time, I did not hesitate to buy in day one. Logging in over 400 hours in the base game and an additional 200 hours in Iceborne, it's easy for me to say that it is truly one of my favorite games of all time. Although I'm still pretty fresh to the series, I do have some desires for an inevitable sequel.
Greetings, Legionnaires. This is a video I've been wanting to make for such a long time now, and I really appreciate your patience on it. I've been teasing or threatening it for a long time, and, well, here we go. We finally got to it. Monster Hunter World, if it isn't my favorite game of all time, it's one of my favorite games of all time. And it's something I've been thinking about, and I've been going back to with Iceborne for, a few years now, which is kind of incredible, especially for me, because I usually don't kind of linger with games like that. But it's been so good that I want to go back to it. Now, I realize that Monster Hunter World 2 might not be called Monster Hunter World 2, so call it whatever you like it. Monster Hunter Universe, Monster Hunter Cosmos, Monster Hunter, whatever. Doesn't matter to me, even though I think World 2 would make a little more sense branding-wise. But anyway, either here nor there. Also, I'm a newcomer to Monster Hunter, and from what I understand, they have the mainline series and then kind of the offshoot series amongst other ones as well. So yes, Monster Hunter Rise is out now, and it's a little bit different than Monster Hunter World, but I'm talking about one that would come after Monster Hunter Rise, and maybe implement a few mechanics from that game as well. So, let's dive right in.
To make this a bit easier to digest, pun intended, I'll be breaking this video up into 3 distinct sections. The world itself, upgrades to the hunters, and then finally, the monsters themselves. Monster Hunter World is divided up into specific areas, or regions as it were. Each is distinct and memorable in its own way. Now, for fans of the franchise who have been around for many years prior to this video, you can attest to having to chase a monster through loading screens. Thankfully, Monster Hunter World and Rise do not make you do this. However, with the next-gen hardware out now, I want to take this concept another step further. I would love to see World 2 have all the regions connected and traversable. Not only would it make the world feel more interconnected, but it would provide unique strategies for dealing with your quarry. For example, let's say you're hunting a Diablos, a powerful creature usually found in desert-like regions. However, if you were able to lure it to a place like Iceborne's expansion of the Hoarfrost Reach, it might make the Diablos a bit slower to charge due to the dramatic change in weather. Or even make it impossible to use its burrow attack because it is now fighting you on a frozen lake. While this might seem like a way to neutralize some monsters' best moves, I think it would also be a place for the monsters to have to adapt as well. Back to our Diablos example. Over time, our horned adversary learns that the ice covering the environment is incredibly tough. So, it plunges its horns into that aforementioned frozen lake and is now charging you with crystallized spikes that not only hit harder, but also cause frostbite. This interconnected world would also lend itself well to turf wars that were only ever seen in the Guiding Lands. Speaking of that area, that is basically what I'm proposing, but on a grander scale. Now, let's move over to the hunter side of things. Let's not beat around the bush on this one. The hunters have, at the time of this recording, 14 different weapon types that facilitate an incredibly wide array of playstyles. While it might not be easy to think of what other styles of weapons could fit in here, I do have one in mind. The unsung hero of the melee world, a weapon designed to harvest crops and souls alike. That's right, I'm talking about a scythe. Now I realize that some great sword variants have the word scythe in the title and that some of the long swords look like them, but I would personally love to see a dedicated scythe moveset that is somewhat of a cross between the insect glaive and the longsword. I'm not saying it should allow you to fly in the air and counter everything, even though admittedly that would be sweet, but something that allows you to be relatively mobile on the ground and perform spinning attacks. I'm just a big Darksiders 2 guy, so you probably see the scythe bias here. However, regardless of the weapon type, I think 1 or perhaps 2 would be great to see in a sequel. I realize that this is no small task, but it could really shake things up for the already massive established fan base. I will say this though, these new weapons don't need to be overly complex. Simple and flashy are key to get folks on board to at least give them a try. If Capcom really did introduce 2 new weapon types, perhaps a more simplistic one, complemented by a very technical one, would be best. Weapons are just one part of the hunter's arsenal, and this next wish might be one of the more bold ones I offer up today. Since the inclusion of the Clutch Claw in Iceborne, fighting monsters have garnered a new dynamic layer that wasn't previous in the base game. Being able to grapple onto a monster briefly and either weaken it or cause it to slam into a wall or monster is incredibly gratifying. On the other hand, from my brief exposure to it and from what I've heard, the wire bug is an excellent addition, especially when it comes to traversal and literally controlling a monster for a brief period. If we could combine these 2 things, I think it might just be one of the greatest tools in all of video games. I call it the Wire Claw, because the Clutch Bug isn't nearly as sleek of a name. It will retain all of the fighting utility of the Clutch Claw along with offering the mobility of the Wire Bug. I'm still all for finding a way to rodeo monsters without it being a completely one-sided fight in the hunter's favor, but I feel that combining these 2 handy tools could make for some Spider-Man style action, or Attack on Titan if that's your jam. Along with this tool, I would like to take a move out of the Horizon Zero Dawn playbook and add another tool that can limit a monster's movement and eventually affix them to the ground. In tandem with this, I would love to see a few more traps thrown in as well. Perhaps one that totally freezes a target in a block of ice, or another that wraps them in ropes and suspends them in the air via balloons, like a piñata. The next few things are more focused on quality of life enhancements that I would love to see implemented. Firstly, let's make it so that regardless of if you have seen the monster or not, you can group up with friends immediately for a hunt. From my understanding, Rise puts the cinematic at the start of a mission, meaning you can all hop in together. World's system of waiting for your friend to load in, find the monster, watch the cutscene, and then be able to join in is painfully slow and needs to be less frustrating than it is currently. With that in mind, and my dream of a huge interconnected continent, I would love to be able to stay with a party to complete multiple hunts in rapid succession. Perhaps like a playlist of sorts that you all agree to upfront and have a few minutes in between hunts to resupply and whatnot. Choosing to stay as a group or go back to base can feel a bit wonky, and the timer is pretty quick on decision making if you fail in a hunt. That brings me to my next point about conveying information. Please, 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 stop giving me walls of text to read for every new aspect of the game. There must be some efficient and engaging way to instill important information into players. Perhaps use the scout flies from World and have them act as guides through the base and on the training field, or condense down the word count. The text can still be there, but I think it's better reserved for a glossary or index. Paragraphs and paragraphs can really scare new players off. I just think there must be a better way to ease newcomers into the glorious hot tub that is Monster Hunter. Fashion over function is a constant dilemma for the About Town hunter, and World had a nice first stab at eventually introducing layered armor. Basically, it means you can take your hodgepodge outfit and make it look a bit more uniform. Again, I would like to take this one step further with full-on transmogrifies. This would mean you could take any piece of your armor and make it look like others after you've properly hunted that monster, naturally. So, if your build demands you wear pieces of an armor set that you aren't too keen on aesthetically, not a problem. I would also love to see each piece be allowed to be custom painted too. Just think of all the crazy cool creations hunters would come up with. Sometimes coming up with necessary resources to craft even a single piece of armor can mean hours and hours of grinding. This formula is baked deep into the foundation of Monster Hunter and spurs one to hunt a monster multiple times. I'm not here to suggest that we get rid of that aspect entirely. What I'm proposing is something focused a bit more on guild building. If you are in a dedicated guild of like-minded hunters, I think it would be cool if you could trade low-level resources. I'm not talking rubies, mantles, or even something nuts like decorations, but just things that other hunters seem to amass naturally. In this way, it would allow for people who can't play as much to at least have a little help from their pals who might be questing daily. I realize this system could expedite the game process by a lot, but I think if tuned properly, it would foster a sense of community. Also, please let me run around the base with my friends like you can in Rise. It's weird to lock them in the Gathering Hub or my room. Speaking of resources, I would love to see a little less opaqueness when it comes to discovering what pieces of a monster I need to make for higher level gear. I would never have ever figured out that I needed to get a piece from not only a Yeon Garuga, not only a scarred Yeon Garuga, but a scarred Yeon Garuga from the Guiding Lands if I hadn't looked it up online. I understand that the more you hunt, the better chance you possibly have at acquiring a resource for your wish list, but these things that are just 3 question marks in a row don't really drive me to hunt any specific monster because I sometimes have no idea what monster I need to hunt to begin with. Also, armor and weapons sometimes require parts from 2 different monsters, which makes it even harder to parse out. It's almost like the blacksmith is toying with me. Alright, enough about hunters. Let's talk about the monsters. Well, I could sit here and list all the monsters I would love to see in the next mainline Monster Hunter game. I think that would be somewhat boring. Instead, I'd like to suggest a few additions to make them even more crucial to the series. The more sadistic viewers watching this will probably enjoy the next idea in that of a bit more violence and battle damage. These games are centered on an individual or group mercilessly beating a monster to death, so viciousness is nothing new. However, I want to crank this up as far as that T rating will take me. I'm talking battle damage like you've never seen before, baby. Rathian tails holding on by a few fibers, Bonbaro horns visibly cracking with subsequent hits, and Rathalos wings that are being shredded apart. This would allow hunters to know how close they are to actually succeeding in breaking a monster part, and would play into the realistic nature of these creatures. The coup de grace would come in the form of an execution. Once the monster is truly on its last legs, so to speak, hunter or hunters can decide on the finishing blow. Decapitate it with the greatsword, run it through with the lance, or perhaps crush its head in with one mighty blow from the hammer. The choices are many. While this may sound like the ramblings of a madman, like most of the videos on this channel, I really think it would be the celebratory moment where someone from the group has offered up the final word for doing a good job. Lastly, this is my biggest ask of you, Capcom. The use of palicos on the battlefield is undeniable. The addition of palamutes seems almost game-breaking. However, I implore you to consider allowing hunters the ability to tame any monster. Yep, Elder Dragons too. This is a wish list after all. My proposition has caveats. Unlike the constant companionship of a palamute or palico, these tamed monsters that were initially captured and trained would be somewhat like summons in certain Final Fantasy games. Put them on a timer, or perhaps if they take enough damage, they have to retreat for a long period of time before being summoned once again. You could either decide to let them act independently to cause an impromptu turf war, or utilize the Wire Claw, patent pending, to saddle up and ride off to battle. Just imagine these crazy anime-esque moments where you call forth your ferocious buddy to assist you on the hunt. It would be incredible. Originally, I was going to say that Elder Dragons should be kept out of this idea, but the thought of summoning a Nergigante to dive bomb into the fray is just too tantalizing to pass up. While I did say at the top that this would be broken up into 3 parts, I also wanted to include some of the Legionnaire's thoughts as well. This idea comes in from Mecha. I'd like a new weapon added. It's been a few years, perhaps some kind of scythe or giant shears, or maybe an explosive javelin. Couldn't agree with you more, Mecha. Thanks for writing in. These next ideas come in from Zora Caviar. He says this: new weapon type or types, more monster archetypes, leviathans, insects, serpents, beasts, amphibians, etc. No more gimmick mission types, siege missions, rampages, etc. Less RNG, craftable decorations and talismans, please. Stronger emphasis on elemental damage builds. Most of the meta skills like critical eye, attack up, and critical boost only affect raw damage. heavily weighting the meta in favor of raw damage over elemental damage. Let's buff up the elemental damage, y'all! Bring back Deviants. These twists on familiar monsters provided the ultimate skill check without relying on cheap mechanics like damage checks and rewarded you with unique and powerful gear, a worthy reward for a worthy challenge. Something like Deviants would also provide a much more interesting endgame activity than something like Tempered Monsters, which are literally the same fight, but they just do more damage. Lastly, surprise me! Show me what I don't know that I want. Finally, this one comes in from Sean. He says, I'm very curious to see legendary weapon quests for a future Monster Hunter game. Maybe when a hunter hits a very high hunter rank, they can unlock a quest line. Perhaps the quests can include an exclusive solo-only monster. I say high hunter rank because if people know they can fairly easily get a best-in-slot weapon early enough, then they will not really bother with upgrades or make the standard best weapons. So I think it needs to be hundreds of hours, 300 hours, for example, to reach this. Best weapon should be very difficult. Just a thought. Thank you so much for writing in, Sean, and for everybody else who did. I really appreciate it.
Legionnaires, thank you so much for sticking it out to the end of this video. I know these can be a little bit longer, but for anybody who makes it to the end, just know that I care about you and I appreciate you so much. Let me know down in the comments if you did make it to the end, and please post like your top 3 favorite Monster Hunter monsters of all time. They don't have to be from World or from Rise, they can be from anywhere, wherever it is, and we'll see if we have any overlap. I've come into this franchise a bit later in life. Monster Hunter World is truly my very first Monster Hunter, so my perspective is much maybe newer than other people, but maybe there's some veterans who watch this or like, they need to do this, bring this element back, things that I don't even know about. Please post it down in the comments below, because I would love to talk with you guys and hear what you guys would love to see in a true sequel. If you enjoy these types of videos, I've actually done them for like Diablo 4, which some of that stuff's coming true, some of it's not, and you know, just kind of like ideas moving forward with games. And if you have any that you'd like to see, these wishlist videos are probably my favorite ones I ever make. So like, please never hesitate to be like, hey Jimmy, you should do a, you know, Gears of War 6 dream video or something like that. Whatever it might be. But either way, I appreciate you guys, and I especially appreciate the patrons who give me money every month to help fund the channel. That means a lot to me. You guys don't have to do that, but just know that I appreciate it. Yeah, and until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome. Bye-bye. Barioth, Nergigante. Zora Magdaros. No, I'm just kidding, That'd be crazy if I said Zora. People would be like, how dare you? Oh my goodness. I don't know. Who, top 3? Nergigante for sure. Top tier. Even the Elder Dragons shake in fear. Or tremble in fear. I think that's the name of his song. Super good. Yeah, I love it. Oh, Toby Gadachi. Toby Gadach, babe. Oh, Zinogre. There we go. Barioth, Zinogre, Nergigante. There you go. I think that's the top 3 for me. Just if anybody's stuck around this late, probably nobody. Anyways.